Let's Talk Prevention Idaho. This podcast is a production led by the statewide nonprofit Community Coalitions of Idaho, or CCI. Here at CCI, it is our job to support the work of prevention across the state of Idaho. Through education, training, and providing valuable resources, we help make the work of prevention happen all across Idaho. This podcast will update listeners on what CCI is doing from week to week, as well as provide information for vital professionals in Idaho and across the country. All right, everybody, how's it going? So great to see everybody out here for another podcast. We have a really neat opportunity today, and this was born out of one of the first in-person conferences that we have been to since the pandemic kicked off and really just set the whole prevention world on a pause, on fire. I'm not quite sure how we describe that anymore, but it does look like we are back to normal-ish, and that we seem to be turning a corner. So fingers crossed, no more pandemic, no more lockdowns. We can finally get back to work. So we just finished up the last week or so with Jermaine Galloway's The Tall Cops biannual conference, the Northwestern Alcohol and Substance Abuse Conference. And it was really interesting to hear so many great speakers talking about alcohol and substance abuse issues and how they correlate to our mind and body and the way that they interact with our given cellular structures. And then two, really explaining what some of the things like why was alcohol deemed essential. So we're not going to get into that topic today. It was a little teaser for a future podcast, but we did get a chance to, by following some of the amazing presenters that you will hear on future podcasts, we were digging through their Twitter accounts. And this is one of those areas, prevention providers, where Twitter will be relevant to you because you will find some really neat nuggets that you've never known existed in the prevention world that you can use as resources. And they don't always have to be in your backyard, which we're going to prove here today. So we were digging through and we came across this really neat one. I believe it's called the Alcohol Review on Twitter. And it's with Phil Kane. How you doing, Phil?
Hi. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm good. Thanks.
And when I was reading Phil's, like I clicked on stuff and I'm reading a little bit about Phil. I'm like, oh, so I believe you went to school in Boston, right?
Not quite. No, I think maybe no. I'm a Brit. I went to school in the UK, in Nottingham in the UK. I have fleeting experience of the US, but yeah, not as much as.
I saw a bunch of stuff that looked like he was a U.S. journalist. I'm like, oh, how cool! This will be neat. Reach out to him and asked him if he wanted to jump on the podcast. He was very receptive, and I found out that lives in Austria. He's British. So I was like, this is gonna be fun. So the first fun part was figuring out the time zone, right, Phil?
Thankfully, that's right. Yeah, I think we're 6 hours dividers as well as a few thousand miles. So
yeah, so it's AM here, it's PM for him.
That's right.
So, but one of the things that I really liked when I was going through Phil's website and stuff was there was a quiz, and I wanted to see how good I was at my knowledge of alcohol when it came to wide range of questions that Phil had on his quiz. And I think I did all right. I think I got, how many questions is it? It's like 20.
Yeah, I think it's 22 questions, something like that.
I got like 16, 17. So I don't think I did horrible.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think it's not a quiz in the sense of you know this and you got it figured out or anything. It's really just to explore some of the ideas that I go into in my work, which are not all sort of absolutely meat and potatoes kind of knowledge. So yeah, it's interesting to find out.
And you have 2 ebooks, right, that are related to alcohol?
That's right. I have two books. One book is available both and in TWE variety, called Alcohol Companion, which is the kind of first book I did, which is largely where that quiz came from. It's going through a lot of the science related to alcohol on sort of brain science and neuroscience, some of the sociology related to it, how our kind of the process of becoming accommodated to alcohol, and the difficulties we can have with alcohol, and difficulties we can have removing alcohol from our lives. And then subsequently I wrote another book called Alcohol for Nerds, which is largely based on my experience of kind of applying that knowledge that I'd acquired really myself as an interested outsider. I'm a journalist, not a medic, and looking at how that affected the way that I looked at alcohol, and the way that changing my attitude to alcohol changed my life. So I've tried to sort of look at it, from a very sort of cold, objective point of view, but then also looked at it from a point of view of just a human being who's really trying to get the head around, some of these questions that were asked in that quiz, which some of them are just not straightforward questions, and coming up with different answers changes the way you maybe go about life in a way.
So how did you get interested in this whole field of alcohol, and how it interacts with us and how we interact with it?
Well, I'm a journalist. I'm who basically ended up in Austria, as you mentioned, because I wrote about former Yugoslavia. So I was interested in this complicated and difficult political and at one point military situation, which obviously thankfully died down. But as a journalist, you tend to gravitate towards difficult and complicated things that people don't really want to talk about, and you think, this is something I should go and find out about. And so I suppose that instinct was there in me choosing this topic. And as I was looking for a science topic, I had a background in mathematics, and it gives you an ability to sort of look in on what's going on in scientific subjects with some ability to critique what people are saying without being specifically an expert. So I was looking for science subjects. So I thought, here's a science subject with this kind of complicated and rather difficult aspect to it in terms of the politics and the social side of it. So yeah, I thought, well, this is one that should deserve some attention, and that's that really. Sat down and read the papers, and here we are 6 years later, and it's still interesting. So,
oh wow, that's good that something that you've been doing, you started doing 6 years ago, that you're still doing, you're still interested in. A lot of times people, they move on to the next thing pretty quickly.
Yeah, I would say that it's kind of there are lots of different aspects to it. I mean, the books sort of reflect that, in the sense that one is that looking at it as an individual who sort of pours this stuff inside them, and what happens. That's one question, and then there's the question of what happens if you kind of change the way you think about that, which is the second book. And then I suppose what we're talking about in terms of Alcohol Review, which is a kind of ongoing publication that I now edit. It's about how we as a society, we as human beings around the globe, and I'm very glad that you're kind enough to have me on here, because that's part of my point, is the fact that it's a topic which everybody of all nationalities and backgrounds should be interested in to some degree, because it's a way we can improve our lives and understand one another better. So yeah, it's those layers, and the fact it has all those fascinating layers all working together make it a topic which is useful to us, and I think also pretty exciting and interesting in its own way.
Yeah, one of the things that first led me to want to sit down and interview you was when I took the quiz, and it's one, we're going to have a quick intersection here. But this whole, we spoke earlier before jumping on to the interview, was that we live in a state that has no marijuana legalization period. And one of the big things is it always starts with medicine and then escalates, from there in the legal aspect. And one of the questions on your quiz is, for most of its history, alcohol was considered a medicine, true or false. And really, my favorite quote that I've loved ever since I was a sophomore in high school was from George Santayana, where those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And we seem to continue to have these things that they're called medicine. They get introduced as a legal substance that we know is not good for us, and then we deal with the consequences. So, can you walk us through like that? Because that question, true or false, that's true, right?
Yeah, it was. I mean, until remarkably recently. I mean, in the 1940s, you probably still find some doctors who were prescribing it. Admittedly, there were probably oddballs and somewhat, throwbacks. And even now, there are sort of ongoing debates about heart benefits. So there's these last sort of vestiges of this belief that it's somehow good for us. And I, just before we start this, it isn't. There's clear evidence that it isn't, and we shouldn't ever. That's one of the conclusions of the book, is that you just forget all this stuff. It's nonsense. We should put this in the past, but it's nevertheless there, and it's informative, as you say, about the way we as human beings react to substances that to give us some pleasure. Undeniably, there is a pleasure involved in inebriation with alcohol, and I imagine with marijuana, and we try and rationalize it. We try and turn this thing that sort of feels nice into something which is useful, and I think it's a very tantalizing thing, and I think it's important, whatever your choices are about these things, to sort of keep that distinction clear, that something may feel nice, but that doesn't make it do you any good. Certainly with alcohol, that is the case. There is no sort of utility to alcohol. It can taste nice or make you feel nice to in moderation or whatever, but you're not going to get rid of any problems by drinking it, or alleviate any problems of a physical nature. So that's just which I think is what distinguishes something which feels nice from a medicine. This utility factor, and so with alcohol, I think it's getting rid of that is very very important. Also quite difficult, if we've been sort of fed images of things that sort of benefit us in sort of slightly difficult to pin down ways, our social status or our popularity or whatever. I mean, is this a medicine? I don't know. Is this helping me in some way? Has this got a utility? It's quite a slippery concept, but my conclusion, I think, with many others, is the fact that we should just be quite clear about rejecting that as a reason to drink.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, I think still today you might find a doctor that tells you a glass of red wine isn't a bad thing. It's good for, like you said, your heart. I'm like, no. How about you tell me something that's not bad for my entire body?
Yeah, I think it's the thin end of the wedge, and I think there's something deeper in us, which is probably goes a little bit beyond science, which is some sort of placebo, some deep comfort factor, which makes us want to consume something that does us good. I've got a herbal tea here, and somehow I like the idea that this might be doing me good. And in this case, it doesn't matter whether I'm right or wrong, but in other cases it does matter. And in alcohol is a case where it does matter that we kind of reject that notion.
And one of the questions that was on there that I don't think I got right, I don't remember, but it was, I'll have to go back and look at they did have it sent to my email, the results sent to my email, because I wanted to be able to refer back to it. But one of the questions was, which of these is more likely to happen after we have a placebo drink, like an alcohol-free beer, that might be mistaken as an alcoholic one? And I don't think I got that one. What is the answer to that question? Is it all of those?
I think it was. I forgot what the options were now. But,
blackouts, becoming more outgoing, or arguments and fights.
Oh right. Well, I think outgoing. You become more outgoing. People. In situations
they have that liquid courage, right?
A bit of liquid courage, and I think. I mean, it's probably a question which is sort of psychologically open, but I think also if you're talking about a social effect, you're given permission to act in a certain way. if everybody in that group sort of feels they've had a drink, suddenly it's okay to, you know, smile a bit more or be a bit matey or flirt or whatever indicators you might have of being slightly intoxicated. And that this is about a social understanding between you that it's now okay to behave this way rather than this way, which is only partly to do with what you've consumed. I mean, this is an effect which is I think extremely interesting and insightful in the way that we're drawn back to alcohol, perhaps. In that, it's not just the alcohol, it's wanting this permission again to be with people and to be able to act in this informal way, or if you're a social drinker. And this isn't really nothing to do with the alcohol as a psychoactive. It's to do with the fact that if you're in this context with this flag in your hand, a drink of some kind, then it's okay. You can be like that. Which if there was a glass of milk in a different context, people would say, what on earth are you doing? This is not allowed. And this is a social phenomenon which isn't nothing directly to do with the effects of alcohol on our brains.
Yeah, we were talking about how alcohol in social situations. We were talking earlier about how much the type of alcohol that we drink has changed. It's no longer your classic beer wine situation where guys drink beer, women drink wine, or a fruity drink. Now, with the introduction of all of these seltzer products that are all fruity, it's kind of blended the boundaries of who drinks what now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very much bound to our identities, whether we like it or not. I don't know, to what extent our sort of taste buds are sort of gendered or, have our identity bound to them. But I suspect that a lot of it is the fact that as guys we are supposed to do X, Y, or Z and consume X, Y, or Z, and all the images around that product are sort of pointing at us saying you should have this. And that's been the case with alcohol for many generations, with women sort of being directed towards fruitier things and men more towards beer. And it seems that seltzers are kind of sort of finding a bit of a middle ground there of guys who are prepared to depart from the pouring old hops and malt combination, and women maybe who also veer away from wine coolers or whatever it might be. So it's again an interesting phenomenon, and again probably has very little to do actually with the way we're engineered as beings, but the way we are programmed to behave by people who want the dollars out of our pockets. So
well, I think today's the generations that precede you and I, they seem to want to break every stereotype that we have, like every stereotype, every tradition that has kind of carried through most recent history. And they too, they seem to see like one can or one bottle of a substance as one drink, and they're learning very quickly that that is not the case, that they are consuming multiple drinks. If we're talking about what constitutes an actual, drink of alcohol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the American standard is referred to as a standard drink, isn't it? Which is a pretty slippery way to call it. It's one of my little bugbears from writing a book, is the fact that we should just stick to like a volume of alcohol. Raw alcohol, how many milliliters or I suppose ounces, fluid ounces, in a drink, and to just look at that. That is the way to measure, this particular substance. Trying to come up with different national measures here, there, and everywhere is deeply confusing. And as you say, if the manufacturers just up the percentage, I believe they can go very high. Some of these seltzer drinks and stick it in the same size can. Of course, the consumer is completely baffled as to what they're really consuming. I mean. It's very difficult, and once you've, as you said, once you've had one 500. Sorry, I'm not very good at non-metric measures, but once you've had a large can of something which is 14%, then it's pretty much game over for a lot of people, I think. But,
yeah, you've entered the the binge drinking category pretty quickly, and you may not even realize that you were
Yeah.
legally binge drinking now.
Yeah, I think, I don't know what the formal definition is. Again, it's one of these things that sort of varies from one study to the next, but it's a lot lower than we think. And it's I think Americans and Northern Europeans have this habit of drinking in this pattern, and I think it's very unfortunate. There are containers which are essentially just a kind of itemized binge drink, sold for probably a couple of dollars or $3, I should imagine. So it's a very good commercial product, no doubt, but I wonder whether it's such a good idea.
Well, they also sell it as it's healthy for you, low fat, something that you can almost like guilt-free drinking. I know a lot of young people say, but it's so good for me. And I'm like, what do you mean good for you? I mean, you won't get a beer
Yeah.
belly as fast as me, but you're, I was like, I don't think you understand. And is this something you address in your book, what alcohol does to different organs in your body, like your brain, liver, stomach, stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I focus mainly on the brain in that, this is why we drink, fundamentally, if you ignore the fact that there are tastes and, flavors and things like that. But essentially, we drink it because it gives us a certain feeling and a certain, response in our brain. So that's the key one. And I think a lot of the, other consequences of drinking, to excess, stem from, the effects it has on our brains and the sleep and all these other factors that come into it. Yeah, I mean, basically, the bottom line is that no amount is good for us. If you look at all the different organs in our body and add them all up, that you can maybe find some modest sort of benefit and some enormous study, but you find something else is negative somewhere else. So it's just no doctor would recommend it. No doctor worth their salt would recommend it as a medicine or a preventative medicine. And it really is as simple as that. So and I can understand. I mean, we are fed imagery from the seltzer people now, but wine manufacturers and beer manufacturers, it all has this wholesome, warm country fields, and it's been done forever, and granddad does it, and people who live for a very long time have done it. It's also not actually saying that this is good for us, but it's kind of saying it's pushing us in that direction emotionally, and so yeah, it's something we have to be sort of consciously push away. I don't think I've written this book, but I still watch these ads, sort of drooling and sort of being sort of drawn in by this imagery, because it's terribly powerful. This is the other thing is that marketing works, and I think now stepping beyond the sort of individual level, a lot of the discussions around alcohol come down to whether it's promoted to children or promoted in certain contexts like sport or whatever. There's this in Europe, there's a European football competition at the moment. I don't know how many beer adverts I've seen. They're trying to meld these two activities, much the same, I'm sure, with American football.
Yeah.
But by the time you finish watching a couple of matches, you are fully convinced that it's essential to have a beer, to actually, appreciate this sport, and which is an absolutely absurd idea, because you can quite easily watch, American football or soccer, drinking a cup of tea, it's fine. But marketing works, and we as individuals have to accept our gullibility, particularly around substances maybe that we overconsume. Is just be careful. They're quite clever, these marketing people.
Yeah, they can make you think that you can't watch a football game or a sporting match of any kind without some form of alcohol. And what I found was most interesting was, especially here. So back here in the States, when it comes to NASCAR will promote alcohol like nobody's business, but most of the places where they have tracks, marijuana is a legal substance. They won't promote it. They actually will promote prevention campaigns against marijuana use versus actually having any marijuana sponsorship or ads or anything, which I've always found very, very interesting. Because
Yeah.
I mean, you walk around the track, every race car is sponsored by some, brand of beer. You've got
Mm.
hard seltzers all over, the fan zone. I mean, you can buy pretty much any type of alcohol, wine, beer, seltzer you could think of all over the place. So I was just,
No, very interesting. I mean, it's actually a bit of a bugbear of mine. I just wrote a piece this week about driving and alcohol, and I think even the most sort of diehard drinker will accept the fact that drinking and driving is just a terrible combination. I mean, it almost. I don't know what percentage of accidents involve alcohol, but it's a very high percentage. And basically, we just are unable to really do these two things at the same time. I think it's deeply ironic that a sport which involves driving extremely well, and I'm absolutely sure none of these drivers get in their car after drinking anything, because they're not wrapped around the stand. So and it's sad, and it's very sad that these two things get sort of melded in our heads. We're admiring the skill of this NASCAR driver or this footballer or whatever at the same time, basically sort of inebriating ourselves to the point where getting to the fridge is a bit of a problem. So it's tragic. It's rather a tragic combination. So yeah, I think but looking at the just how bad we are at driving after drinking, I think is a very good way of maybe disincentivizing that as a thing to do, because we're not only bad at driving, we're bad at a lot of other things. The reason we don't sort of tend to notice it is the fact that we don't die, or we don't break our extremely expensive car, but we can make a complete fool of ourselves or hurt people, or do things which are less than perfect, and we shouldn't ignore that. And it's simply because it's not in the same league as a car accident, it's still something which is connected with a particular substance that we've consumed. So anyway, that's my actually, you just had to touch on my beef of the week. So
we have a lot of coalitions that are primarily youth focused, and the way that sometimes we get upset at the youth, at the rate our youth are using, but we have to look back at the example that we're setting for our youth. Like, if we have to have a drink every night to decompress from work, why would we think that our youth would think that's anything outside of normal? Like, we kind of set the standard for what either our children or the children in our community or in our direct care, how they kind of perceive these substances.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I think, and the links, I'm sure in your work, the links between sort of adult drink alcohol products. I talk about alcohol, but I'm sure it works with other substances. But if children associate this with somebody they respect and love and whatever, and they think it's normal, then it's, of course, the path is sort of smoothed for them should they be offered this substance. And it's a big factor, no doubt.
Well, I think that we have talked this particular subject into a dark hole, but we did share on our Facebook page your the link to your quiz. But how can people best find these books that you have published if they're interested in learning more about your work and these books?
Probably the easiest way is Googling me. My name is Phil Cain, C-A-I-N, and my website is philcain.com, because I have almost no imagination. And my books are Alcohol Companion, Alcohol for Nerds, and this newsletter is Alcohol Review. The last of these is a free newsletter. So hopefully that can be of use for people tracking this subject all around the world, and hopefully getting some context which is of use to them.
Cool. Well, I want to thank everybody who's listened to this podcast. If you have a idea for a future podcast that you would like to see us set up, record, offer to you, go ahead and send us an email at communitycoalitionsofidaho@gmail.com. That's communitycoalitionsofidaho@gmail.com. Or you can message us on any of our social media platforms. All of those are acceptable ways to reach out to us as well, to give us feedback. We always love feedback, and we want to hear what you guys are interested in learning about next. We want to thank Phil for giving us a portion of his evening and time, and for giving us this trip around, halfway around the world almost, right, Phil?
Yeah, get in there. Yeah, maybe next time, I'll call in from Hong Kong or something.
Yeah, we'll get Phil to go to a different location. We'll have him go to Australia instead of Austria, so we can get down on the bottom of the planet. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Phil, for joining us. Until next time, be safe out there, guys.